Bartlett Sher, award-winning theatre director and a film director. Welcome to Al Arabiya, sir.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
You're a Tony Award winner as a theatre director, nominated 9 times, but you won once for a musical, South Pacific, in 2008.
Yes.
And why did you move from theatre, musicals, opera, to film?
Well, I think that people who are compelled to direct like to tell stories, and the medium a rich array of mediums is really fun. So when I first started, it was in plays, moved into musicals, then was invited to do operas, and then especially with something like OSLO, this first film, it really was a perfect kind of play that could be turned into a film. And it was just an exciting idea of exploring a whole new way of thinking about how to tell a story.
When filming in different locations around the world, and you were filming in June at the height of the pandemic.
Yes, we were filming in October in Prague and in Dubrovnik, yeah.
But can you tell us then, how did you deal with this?
Well, we were very safe all the way through.
Testing all the time?
Yes, testing. I was tested 5 times a week. You control the environment in which the actors come into it and the crew. Everyone is masked. It's extremely careful, and we made it through. It's rigorous and it's arduous to make it.
It was an unprecedented threat.
Yeah, and I think that mostly film sets are very social environments, as are theater, being in the theater, but not under a pandemic. You actually only see each other in relationship to making the work. And then you go home and you're in your isolated sort of world, and then you come back and you film. And we were lucky in that HBO was enormously supportive, but the protocols and rigorousness were intense.
It's not a documentary.
No.
It's a film.
No, yeah.
Telling the story of how dialogue
Yeah.
Can be achieved between enemies.
Being here at the UN, you walk through the beautiful hall and you see these portraits of all the former Secretary Generals. They capture something about each person. And what we were doing is trying to capture the spirit of an event and capture the experience of it. And we do assemble. The one interesting thing about OSLO and the research is that almost all of the accounts agree on the events. So we could track the events and then find our own way of building a sort of theatrical film sort of version of what we call like an intellectual thriller to build these events. But we're looking at the spirit of something as much as we are the letter.
The dialogue between enemies.
Yeah, the dialogue between enemies. And what also happens with the film is that everything, it may be on this one level here, but it represents this and it represents this. So you have the story of the Palestinians and the Israelis helped by the Norwegians into dialogue. But at a subtextual level, it's about any implacable enemy and how do you get them to talk. And theater is about conflict and about resolving conflict, or as JT would say, it's not between a wrong and a right, it's between 2 rights. And so it had all the material of great drama. And so we go in and try to kind of assemble a way of seeing this event and a way of encountering these complex ideas.
Why do you think a married couple in 1992, a diplomat in the foreign ministry in Norway, and a sociologist and a head of a FAFO Foundation think tank, her husband, Terje Larsen, and the diplomat, of course, is Muna Yul. Why did they decide to insert themselves in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and while the U.S. was already engaged? I know she did a visit with her husband to Gaza, but that was a few years before. Why did they decide in '92 to insert themselves and start this process?
Well, I think a lot of it was motivated by Taye, who had himself been doing studies of Gaza, had gotten deeply involved and connected with the people, had met with Arafat, and he was the one who I think saw a different way that you could negotiate, and a different kind of an approach to negotiating. So a lot of it had to do with his way of seeing a new approach and then working with Mona to see if they could facilitate such a conversation.
Why should the Arab and also the Israeli moviegoers go and see the film? After all, it happened, the story is from 1992-93, and some might argue also does not apply today.
I I think there's a great tradition in the theater and in filmmaking of what we would call history plays. So, Shakespeare would write plays about his own history and dramatize the history, and you will see many films like this about certain particular times. I don't think we're trying to suggest that it applies today. We're trying to suggest that people need to understand their own history and have a better kind of context for these arguments. In the same way, the Oslo process was successful, was only meant to be a beginning of change.
It was in the beginning.
Yeah, it was never meant to
the
be
end of all.
suggest that we were going to solve this problem. It was.
Do you feel the optimism of Oslo, that dialogue worked and we had accords, feels now jarringly out of step with the current events
Yeah.
just last week?
Well, I do think that my experience of the Oslo Accords is that there are two ingredients that make for these kinds of things to make change. One ingredient is that people have to sit down and talk. That's a better way of solving disputes than others. And the other ingredient is great leadership. If you have someone like Rabin, you have somebody who is the reluctant soldier who finds a way to make change. And without great leadership, without real guidance, without people who are willing to make huge changes that support the dialogue, then the dialogue is not necessarily going to be meaningful. And that's what you learn. I think of all the things that I was most affected by in spending so much time with this, it's kind of the kind of courage that it took leaders like Rabin
And Arafat.
and Arafat, to make these changes, to be in these situations and realize they had to make dialogue and had to seek solutions that might not be everything they wanted.
Some might say that the story of Oslo is told in your film from a Western perspective.
Yes.
Do you agree?
I agree. I agree in the sense that our entrance point into it are two Norwegians who then lead us into the story. But I think that the arguments between the two, between the Israelis and Palestinians, are as authentic and well researched as we can. I don't think that anyone can completely pretend to lose their lens, to take away their lens. And as an honest filmmaker, I have to take responsibility for my lens. My lens is Western. That's how I see it. I will strive, as you do in any kind of effort as an interpretive artist, to push beyond my point of view,
Yes.
to see other points of view, and hopefully I've gotten good at that. And that happens with any kind of work we do. It's part of the sense of understanding an other or getting to another place to figure out if we can have these conversations. So it's a big thing for someone like HBO to help us, support us to try to take on a conversation like this. We also try to stay balanced and fair and responsible to both sides.
Can you talk to us about the journey you've done, moving from theater to film? Tell us about the little things, the big things.
It's very interesting because I'm very much a creature of the theater, and the theater has a very particular process. And
Was it easy?
It was absolutely brutally difficult. It was really not easy at all. There's no question that it's hard, but it's mostly because you have to rearrange everything you understand about how you see something. If I'm sitting in a theater and I'm working with a company, I'm in constant contact with them and building something. I'm looking at it up, on a stage, and audiences get to pick their point of view. I have to control focus in a different way. I build rhythm in a different way, and we have to repeat it every night. In film, it's maybe the opposite. I have to decide every single point of focus. I'm showing you everything, and I have to learn how to see completely differently. And the process for the work is different. It's very painstaking and slow. You go through and you build a scene over a long period of time in one day, and it's quite intense and quick. We can build up a performance over weeks. In the case of a film, you get about an hour and a half to go from first reading to like scene work to first preview to opening, because you're going to film that day is going to be forever. So it's so much intense pressure for actors. It's a lot of pressure and you build this toolbox, and then you come back here and you can rearrange it any way you want in editing. So
We
it
see how
was,
much he loved it.
yeah, but it's what's funny is that it's just an incredibly, I feel very privileged
course.
that I was able to go through such a completely transforming way of thinking about my work in another medium, and that was very.
You had some beautiful shots in the film.
Yeah, well, I was also lucky to have Janusz Kaminski, who's one of the greatest cinematographers in the world, helping me, and he's somewhat improvisational and so visual, and that really, I was surrounded by great collaborators, and
Yes,
actually was
yes.
able to make it.
You were nominated for 9 awards, Tony Awards for the theatre, and I'm sure Oslo will get you a few nominations, if not many, this year
Well,
in the Emmys and the Golden Globe, and I'm sure it will do very, very well. We wish you the very, very best, and thank you for this interview.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
It was a great pleasure.
Thank you, sir.